So I'm going to go ahead and this is Spencer. I'm just going to go ahead and share a welcome slide and mute myself for a few minutes, just so everybody knows they're in the right place.
I'm eating my lunch, so I'm going to be muted for a bit. Probably don't need to see it either.
Yes, exactly. A short lunch break.
Hi, everyone. So it's just quickly, as soon as the background starts bubbling, this IETF media over QUIC side meeting will start. You just heard the recording note from, oh, and I'm not.
Hello, everybody.
Greetings to everyone.
Thank you for hosting, James, Spencer. Thank you. It's very nice that we get to do this.
I just wish we'd had hors d'oeuvres. Let's go ahead and start heading towards getting organized. There are a couple of things that I wanted to say getting organized. We are going to have a pretty good size group of people that are coming to participate in this, and it would be helpful, starting at the bottom of this, of course, it would be helpful for us to remember that this is, at least some of this is headed for the IETF, so we need to be thinking in terms of note well, which yeah, okay. So this includes a number of things that are usually we're most interested in, disclosures about patents for contributions. And we're becoming increasingly interested in things like agreeing to work respectfully with other participants. So please behave. But having said that, wanted to see if, well, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew we are being recorded. Checking. Did everybody get this meeting is being recorded greeting when you came in? Excellent,
Yes.
perfect, thank you.
Yep.
If anybody objects, that it's okay to object, but you have to volunteer to take minutes. And there's a headstock document, a notes document for the IETF, where people, I was going to invite people to sign in, and it is here. And I could put the link in the chat just so people don't have to go trying to figure out where it is. It turns out that it's quite entertaining to put together a meeting where nothing is going to be in the proceedings, so nothing's in the meeting meeting materials. But so there's that. And so that was my administrative things. The things I wanted to say before we got going was we've been talking a lot about I can even turn my camera on. But oh, next time, hit the thing for turning on my video, not turning off my audio. Sorry. We've been talking about a lot of different things when we say media over QUIC, and what I'm hoping that we can do at this meeting especially is to understand the different things that we mean when we say media over QUIC, and to try and identify commonalities between what different people are trying to do. I would like for people to nod their heads or scream or something if that's a problem. And I'll talk slowly now for opportunities for people to complain. And so applying, identifying commonalities between what different people are trying to do and calling it media over QUIC. There are probably some non-goals that we should agree on for the meeting, which is that this is not an opportunity to convince other people to change their minds, or it's not an opportunity to pick a winner at this meeting. This is, after all, a side meeting, which has even less import than, the decisions made in side meetings are even less decisions than the ones that are taken during IETF working groups. So can we agree on those as kind of a framing for what we're doing?
Just one additional thing I think I'd like to have as a goal is to not understand not only what people are trying to do, but why they think it will be better than non-QUIC current solutions. So that, because I think, if you understand what somebody's trying to do without why, sometimes you can discover that as you implement it, you'll have painted out their why. So I think being able to understand, what people are trying to accomplish by moving to QUIC, not just, hey, I want to do this thing over QUIC, but why I think it will be better over QUIC than what I have today.
That would be a lovely thing to do sometime between now and Friday, if that's okay, for us to. We need to talk about that, but I think knowing what people mean when they say, I think would be better over QUIC, it would be good to understand what their thing was as quick, early in that conversation. So when we get about 3 more minutes into the conversation, I will try to represent Jonathan's suggestion, which was +1 by Justin in the chat. I should mention, I am kind of juggling several plates here. So if someone could keep an eye on the chat and interrupt us with anything that's in the chat that's going on that we would need to take notice of, just because I'm not likely to notice it. I would appreciate
Spencer, I'll
that.
look after it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So having said that, I'm hoping that this is a working session, and I'm hoping, and we're starting with a straw man comparison, and there's a URL there, which we could also put in the chat. And I'm asking to help find use cases that are mostly the same or similar to another use case, but different in an important way, or are missing. Later in the conversation, I'd like to, like I say, I'd like to defer this also a little bit. Helping us to identify showstoppers, some of which will be because something is critical in it's depending on some critical significant amount of work to be done in addition to making something run over quick. Or, you know, and there are things that just violate the space-time continuum. So they're physically impossible. You know, like I say, helping us to understand what's a showstopper now and why. And that would take me to there. That would take me to this, which James, did we put the short link on this in the chat for
That's linked from the chat. I don't know if it's a short link. It seems to be a Google Docs.
yeah,
full
yeah,
docs
it's
link.
the short link. Okay, great.
It
So
seems to be it seems to be a long link, but a long link is good too.
Excellent. So this is kind of where I am right now in conversations with James and maybe a couple of other people for a short period of time. And so I'd like to give people a chance to look this over. And what I'd like to do is start at the left-hand column and see if there are people who recognize what we're talking about there. For not for everything, but for your particular applications. Something that James and I were also working to do was to identify things that were close, just from our understanding, and try to put those in bands that, you know, it's like these things are similar, but there's something significantly different about them that even James and I understand. So does everybody see at least one thing on the left-hand column that they care about?
Yes, but there's also missing columns for properties that'll be interesting.
Yes. So
And I think there may be an easier classification of those categories to avoid having to go through all 14 use cases.
right.
Well,
I think interactive here, I think means conversationally interactive. And that is very different from what is quote live. Live typically does not have the same constraint as conversational interactive. So I think it would be useful to separate those two on the latency spectrum. And the solutions you get for those typically differ.
Agreed. The column in particular that I'm thinking of, by the way, is let's call it audience scaling. You could also call it caching or CDN capability. Some of these protocols do have that defined. Others do not yet have that defined, and it's a big deal.
So is what we're talking. So what we're talking about there is audience scaling. Is that right?
Yeah. Can you scale? A quick way to say this is, can you do it with 1 million people?
I mean, like there's many ways you could do it with 1 million people. I mean, I think if you want to say caching, we should just say caching.
I think best one, I think we should call that as a caching.
I'm happy to say we would do this by caching and all the things going down, if that's true. But if somebody says I would do it another way,
I'm perfectly fine calling it caching. I have no problem with that.
cool. If there are no objections.
And one clarification question I had was on the interactive client server applications. The media transport protocol, I think we should keep it flexible. It might be RTP, it might not be RTP there.
Yes, So I'm sorry. So I'm glad this is a working session and not a presentation. The thing I was thinking here was that if we had multiple of something, we can put both of them in. And
Mhm.
if that changes the answer, we need to put another row in. That's fine too.
There's another one that is really useful. It's kind of implied with some of these others, but it's about reliability. Like what kind of reliability you want. It comes out as latency or jitter. You know, if we want to call out jitter as separate from latency, maybe, I don't know, but you know, the ability to not have to retransmit everything.
Yes, and that was what that was what we were trying to get to on this one basically here. Is the point that this is basically about that we need to be also thinking about jitter as well?
I believe so. There's currently problems with L7 proxies today, where if you terminate your L4 on one side, you have to reconstruct the entire application level protocol before you can forward, which means that packet loss on the inbound path causes large bursts and jitter on the outbound path.
See if this does what I wanted to. Sorry.
While you do that, Ali, you've had your hand up for a while. Is there something you wanted to chime in with?
Yes, I was going to say a few things about that scaling versus caching column. I mean, caching is something very specific. I don't think we should call it caching. I mean, caching might be a separate column if you want to. I guess the term we are looking for is maybe efficient or scalable replication or something like that. I mean, there is a significant difference between one-to-many streaming application versus one-to-many Zoom session or Google Meet session. So I recommend changing or adding a new column to indicate that.
Okay. Richard?
If we can do this in real time before I'm trying to catch up, that would be awesome. So for caching here, is this like a maximum number of users kind of a thing?
Mass delivery.
I mean, like people who think, this isn't a small conversation.
My suggestion is we should just add the columns, and if we find that the use cases end up being the same across them, we can collapse them. Caching is not necessarily the same as others, but it's still useful. So let's just do it. Here we go.
Okay, so I'm basically sticking this one in also.
I think mass delivery is the use case. And caching is one way to achieve it.
Right, but mass delivery could apply to every single row here. So I find it almost pointless to have it as a column.
And just to, I do feel having caching as like when we think about how the HTTP world, the caches work with the CDNs, that having that property will let us build some solutions that are not typical media like solutions that we've been building so far. And hence adding it there will let us at least think about that problem space and involving the caches in the network.
And I feel like there is some qualitative difference between scaling to 500 people and scaling to 1 million people.
Yeah.
So I think if we follow the hands, I think we'll have a faster conversation. I think Richard is waiting to speak.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. Hello. Yes, I'm just trying to drain some rice at the same time. Yes, I was going to say that I think in terms of the scaling, probably these live ingest cases have a different, they're qualitatively different in terms of scaling, aren't they? So it's distribution versus contribution is the discriminator for me there. But seeing as you're going wide at the moment, I was just going to suggest adding another use case row for live media ingest using RTP.
We do not have
I'll
that.
do that.
Oh, okay,
You can
cool.
have it.
Yeah, we don't even have that one. Okay, great, cool. Did I? Okay, yeah. So James, you're sticking that in also?
Yep.
Cool. And like I say, please don't get too hung up on the values here until we get a little bit further in. We're still framing, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that if you wanted to put any remarks against that, then I guess the wrist flavor of RTP is potentially interesting from the point of view of your column D.
So in the headstock, which I think we already had the link up for, there's actually also a place for notes. If I just wave this at people for a second, like here below where you logged in, that's a reasonable enough thing for us to make sure that we don't lose track of. If someone could type that in, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I raise that is because you have like your column D is talking about whether it relies on the I can't remember what exactly it said now, whether it relies on the transport protocol for retransmission, was it, or something?
Yeah.
Yes. So I suppose the question would be, would you classify when you say the transport protocol, do you mean QUIC? Do you?
Yeah.
Or do you mean RTP in this context and in this use
So
case?
okay, so for this one here, RTP, RTP running over, has run over UDP. So it would, if you encapsulate that in QUIC, it would not be relying on QUIC for that's not actually, this is actually rely on underlying protocol, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so the idea is that when you look at protocols like HLS and Dash, they rely on, when they're not running on HTTP3, they're relying on TCP for guarantee delivery and retransmission of missing packets, so on and so forth. But we have other media protocols where, particularly the ones that are UDP based, that aren't using QUIC, that are handling that retransmission or flow control themselves.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So in this
I
particular use case,
I have a suggestion, folks. We're spending a lot of time on relatively few people, and I think we need to turn this over more quickly. I'm sorry for being the bad guy here, but we have a lot of people, and if we just discuss something, it's going to take too long.
You're in no way being a bad person. Thank you.
I'm thankful. And Justin, you've been waiting there for long. I would be happy to go after you. Why don't you go before me?
Okay, thanks, Roberto. The only thing I was going to add was we have a lot of stuff focused on media, and I think that also sort of real-time application data is something that would be of interest to a lot of people here, even within WebRTC, just due to the complexity of the current WebRTC stack and the ability to simplify things potentially with use of QUIC.
So if we need to talk about that today, we certainly can. The thing with WebRTC is that's, as you say, complex enough to where at least one of the things that we've been talking about has been doing media for it, but other things as well. So if we could, like I say, kind of focus on the media aspects of things rather than, I'm trying to scope down rather than up. Does that make sense?
Let me take another shot at it. Let me just say interactive applications like game streaming. I think that's something that if we're talking about media streaming, we should talk about being two-way, where there could be controller inputs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where do we put what is that close to?
It sounds like we need another column that would be bidirectional, if I'm interpreting Justin properly.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it like 5, like a new row 6, which after 5 interactive client to server applications.
So James, you would be duplicating that one?
And so it's a different use case, but I think there's also a couple of use cases that have this interactive requirement.
I think James is adding columns. I will add rows.
Yep. Weirdest chess game ever.
You guys can't possibly be surprised at this, right?
All right. And then there's a use case that I see missing, maybe also features, but I'm not clear. And one is seeking. So certainly for many media types, you need to seek around so you can catch up or things like that. So you can make the decision to be at the head with 0 latency, or you can be somewhere away from that. So one way or another, seeking is an interesting use case. Another interesting use case is being able to send your data along multiple paths, whether that's multi-path or not, is an interesting question. So those are 2 interesting either features or use cases.
I think there's the features. The first one that you described of seeking, I don't see that as being fundamentally different from the gaming or like remote desktop scenario that was put to the mailing list. That there's obviously a high level thing of what media is actually delivered, but the functional aspect of the protocol of the receiver sending back a signal to change the output of a stream, it's kind of the same, I think.
I mean, that depends on the implementation, really. There are many different implementations to do this. I have obviously something in mind, but the interesting thing is that you can do seeking for everybody, but you can do seeking for individuals. You could also have different playback rates, etc. And there are questions about how many times you have to present the bits of the media to each person. So that's why I'm saying it's having the ability to do seeking is the important thing, and there are many different ways to do it.
Cool. So we're going to keep, like I say, we're keeping the things that we're adding here, and I think that's an important conversation to have. I think probably the best thing for me to do after we get finished here is to send basically this to the mock list, and we could talk. We could talk about it more on the list. We are here all week, as I say. Does that sound like a plan to people? I'm thinking a head nod, but
sure, it's better than not doing it.
Cool.
I would like to add one thing. Does the end-to-end latency concept cover the congestion control aspects of it as well, or should we list it separately? Because there's been one thing that's been discussed on mailing list on, like DVR would not work for real time. What are we doing here if we want to get the quick work for real time or interactive scenarios? What do we do? Should we list it as a separate feature here, or
so
how do we handle that?
You guys tell me if I'm doing this right. What I'm thinking basically is not today, unless we make a lot of progress, but at some point real soon for us to come up with, in order to do this stuff over here, what is the obvious work in the IETF and obvious work elsewhere. I know that at least some folks are talking about really tight integration with between codecs and transport. Let's put that on the list. Because I know that's something that matters to people. I'm not sure that that's media over QUIC, because I think we're going to, that's going to be at the very least solving broader problems than some of these use cases. Does that make sense? Like I say, I know that this matters, and not just to one or two people.
Victor.
I just wanted to voice a concern about the spreadsheets that was raised in chat by multiple people, where it conflates use cases with solutions. That is to say, live media ingestion using Dash is more of a technical solution, and the use case is live media ingestion. And what I would rather us to focus on is what are the generic use cases, what are the existing solutions for those generic use cases, which is what the spreadsheet tries to address, and what are our ideal solution. Because for some of those, the answer might be WebRTC is adequate. For some of those, the answer might be we need to fit old protocol over QUIC, and for some of them, the answer might be we need a completely new protocol. So I would want to focus more on what are the more abstract use cases.
So for what you're talking about, does it help us to talk about the bands here?
If those are, I see, probably.
Okay, cool.
So some of those are closely related.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I said, the 9 through 12 here, I mean, they're all live, potentially live media ingestion. But they're all using different protocols. Yes, I would be fine for us to talk about that. One other thing that's probably worth us having up here pretty quickly is that whether we are thinking about entirely new protocols.
Right, but I think back to Victor's point, if we're going to put that down as a thing, then we should be eliminating the use cases where we've clearly defined a protocol as part of that row, and to instead focus on the more generic forms.
Cool. So what is the best way for us to adjust this in real time?
So I think for these two, I'm going to do something crazy now that can go. Actually, I'll put that back. I think we can just rename and reword and restructure some of these orange rows as well as these. I disagree with what Alan just said. I think we can clean this up faster than it would take to create a new document. I think we just need to rename and restructure a couple of these rows. So just bear with us a minute here.
Can I make a suggestion, James?
Yeah, go for it.
Please do.
I was going to suggest that you could merge A9 to whatever, A11, those three, for example, and just call them live media ingest. And then you've got independent rows still, but you've got one use case describing different technical options.
Right. So if I was understanding what Richard was saying, we're kind of phrasing the bands more clearly would be a good thing to do. So
something like that, Richard.
Oh yeah, you could roll it up as well. Yeah, that's another way of doing the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sergio,
You lost ingestion entirely there. So
yeah, that if we do that, I think that live means different for different people. So we have to specify what live is, because some people think that live is 1 to 2 second delay, and in real time in RTC live is sub-second. So I would either put live, then I would put ultra low latency. Then all the variants should be there in live mini ingestion.
Would people object to us using what's in the MOPS document now, which is right here? And if you do, please say quickly, because this document's in the working group's last call. But I mean, does this get us where we need to be?
Yeah,
I think there should be a lower. So the difference between 1 second and 10 seconds is huge. And truly interactive, you probably want to be on the low end of 1 second. So like either add another bucket underneath for truly interactive, or you need more classifications for low, because I don't consider 10 seconds low.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, are we saying that this is another ultra low latency thing that was mislabeled?
I think there is also a difference between streaming media and interactive media, and I think that buckets that you had, Spencer, that you shared, it was applying to more of the streaming media, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, that's absolutely it. Yes. So the question was whether we could use it for whether it was helpful as a discriminator.
Cool. Mo.
Yeah, I think one thing that may help is people want to see the use cases split out from the protocols. I agree with that. I think you could go even further and say that what are the true user use cases? These are more like the developer use cases, but what is the true user after? The true user is not after WebRTC or SDP or anything. The true user may be from a browser, I can have interactive conversation. From a browser, I can see a live broadcast, things like that. That may help us whittle down all of these rows into just the few really true user level things. And then how do we as developers want to, solve that and tackle that? I think that's separate. If somebody has a particular need for listing a protocol as a true requirement, like you need to reuse your current infra. You can't use a solution that throws away all of your current infra. That would be useful to know, but maybe as a star, not as a true row.
So that's a good point, but the thing that I would challenge you with is that what we're also trying to do here is see how some of these map onto the existing technical solutions, in part to figure out where the overlap is with the existing and potential work going on in all the other places that things are going on, so that we're not treading on toes. So in a way, we kind of need, we can't just make this way too generic, but there is going to have to be some way of doing that.
Yeah, I think that what we were saying about having the protocol names on some of these things really was kind of an effort to talking about things that are similar but not the same and and differ in important ways, right? So I think that, I think, if you're thinking you reusing existing infrastructure, that really does that would qualify as an important way for a lot of people. And I am, and let me back up to one other thing I was going to say. A decent amount of what I think we're talking about here is also things that we would have that would at least theoretically involve W3C, wouldn't they? In addition, if we're talking about what browsers do. So that may, the awareness of work done elsewhere may be important as well. Tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, it's only true once you start talking about APIs.
I'm sorry?
That's only true once you really start talking about APIs. Like if we're talking about wire protocols, then that's not something the W3C works on, right?
Yeah.
So like we work out what we want on the bottom of this, and then eventually we'd have to, like, if we need affordances in browsers, then you'd go to the W3C for that.
Yeah, but so I guess I was reacting to the thought that doing something from a browser was a requirement on this sheet.
Yeah, I think that's like an overspecification. I think these use cases apply to really all sorts of applications right now, and we may decide that we need things in the browser and later. But for right now, I think we could just set aside, the requirement that this needs to happen in a browser.
Cool, thank you. James, are you keeping an eye on hands going up?
I am. Victor.
Oh, I think I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay. Roberto.
I just want to say that we're talking about media, the requirements of media and the requirements for games, and I don't just mean game streaming, but games, are extremely similar. And I think it would be very sad if we don't capture the opportunity of considering that, because they have all of the same, sometimes reliable, sometimes unreliable, low latency, low jitter. All of those things are almost exactly aligned.
Sure, I think we were going to include them. I kind of haven't done that because like Spence and I are trying to juggle being spreadsheet monkeys as well as meeting chaperones. Besides the points about latency and the bidirectionality of data flow, is there anything else that you think we need to add that should be a consideration for the gaming use case?
I mean, I don't know if you consider this feature solution or what, but in order for things to be interpreted by everybody, like for caching, then everyone has to agree on an address space. And this is going to be true for everything. I'm going to shut up now because I don't know how to deal with that.
This is why we have mailing lists. I'm telling you. And again, I'm trying to put things in the notes section here that are going to be something that we can't handle using the spreadsheet in the next what? How many hours? How many? What, like an hour, maybe 45 minutes, whatever it was. But is that okay? Is that okay for people? Hearing no screaming.
I'm seeing some agreement in chat. Victor, you put your hand back up again.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Roberto said, specifically with regards to gaming and media. I think they, to some extent, there is a difference. I feel like gaming is much more sensitive to latency than most live streaming. And the observation I want to make here is that your latency range will greatly inform the way you deal with losses, and depending what is your latency budget with regards to your RTT. Because if it's huge, you're most likely want to retransmit everything, and if it's low, you want to do some sort of media-specific loss concealment, because you cannot really retransmit within your latency window. And I believe this is going to be, to some extent, the big motivator for difference between the use cases we have at hand.
Yeah, so like I said, where I am right now is just basically saying, don't lose track of the similarities in discussions, and perhaps latency is the biggest differentiator. So beyond that, can we talk about that on the mailing list? Is that okay? Fortunately, we have one. I'd like to say, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I just I want to echo what Robert said on the caching, because some of the things that we've been looking at is also been how do we make use of the caches in the network, which could be like application caches like the CDNs or something different, and how can that be part of the protocol to start with, and having that as one of the requirements that the Spencer you're maintaining about being cache friendly on network, the on-path cache friendly. I think that would be really helpful. It applies to gaming. It also applies to some non-gaming, but interactive media cases as well. The catch-up, the seeking or the catch-up example that Roberto pointed, that really works well in the cases where you're stuck in an elevator, you come out and you want to catch up what's happening in the call. You need there's no easy way to get to those kind of use cases without having those kind of support in the network, and having that as one of the requirements, it would help us at least think through. We might decide we don't do anything with it. At least having listed in the other list that you're maintaining would be helpful.
Cool. Are people looking at the other list by any chance?
Yes, we have the notes open, so we're trying to follow that.
Yeah, perfect. So, and what we're go ahead. I'm
sorry. We got one more. Mo, quickly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to have the hand still up.
Oh, okay.
These are the easy comments to get rid of. Cool. Okay. Are we for what we have over here? What are people thinking that they are missing over here?
So I'm going to present a scenario, and we can figure out how we might want to break that into use cases, but it is a very interesting scenario. I have 8 people interacting via mixed media, chat, audio, and video. 4 of them are on a train, and 4 of them are scattered elsewhere. The train goes into a tunnel and loses connectivity for 10 or 15 seconds, and then the train comes out. Now, let's say we were broadcasting this group of people out to many other people. What happens when the train comes out of the tunnel? And I'm asking this question because I cannot figure out a good answer to it, which is why this scenario might be interesting. And yes, David is right. It does sound like a joke, but that's kind of to make it memorable. If we can figure out like all the different ways we would combine the things with the output, I think that might be illuminating. This can actually happen, or variants of, and each of these variants represents something that we would want to solve.
What I suspect that is something that we would be helpful if we thought about this for a bit. Would people be okay if we did that one on the mailing list? Because I think what you're talking about there is the behavior of the application, right? More than just the media, the packet payloads themselves, right?
I think they're inextricably tied together, use cases and what we do to put them together, but I'm happy with whatever. We're just talking and figuring things out.
Yeah, like I say, let's be sure and put that in the notes section that we're maintaining, because I like I say, that's a thing.
Mo.
Yeah, I think that was actually a good point that raises an issue about upload versus download, or upstream versus downstream. Whenever we talk about delivery, we kind of conflate both, and we think that a lot of the requirements, are on both sides. But I think a lot of people want the possibility for reliable contribution always. Even in real-time cases, even in interactive cases, you always want the contribution to be reliable, because it may end up being recorded, cached, distributed later, or whatever. But delivery or distribution, you may want to have different policies for the distribution. Now, of course, this assumes that there's some relay hop that's doing this, but I think almost everybody on the call is mostly looking at, cloud-based relays anyway, not direct peer-to-peer. And if you're already doing that, then you probably do want to distinguish your contribution flows, latencies and reliability and everything from your distribution latency and reliability. In the case that was presented, I would assume that there's no good reason to ever throw away contribution. You would buffer it and send it eventually, and the server may not distribute that, but it may have it, and it may allow for trick play of receivers that do want to go back and catch those last 10 seconds. So I think we should be careful about the contribution versus distribution directions, and about latencies and reliabilities in those two directions, and don't think the entire flow from end to end has a single policy.
Right. And I wanted to say one other thing. The thing as we get closer to peer-to-peer is that we've got the problem with QUIC v1 that it's client server enough to where there's not really a natural reversal mechanism built in yet. So we could talk, and like I say, I think that's a good conversation to have on the mailing list, but to see, what are things that are that could be moved down here for us to think about more, rather than to try to do something in the fairly near term. What else?
Hey, Justin.
So I'm just a little confused by that last statement that Spencer made about we're not counting peer-to-peer scenarios as above the line when we have that, sort of in row 7.
Right. So assume that anything that Spencer says where one part of the spreadsheet doesn't match the other part of the spreadsheet is that we just haven't made all the updates to the spreadsheet yet.
Okay. I mean, my overall framing on
that's
this
why
is that
we're on my chest.
there are things about client server that are different in that, can we make use of existing infrastructure and that sort of thing? But, the fact of can we use peer-to-peer because QUIC is not inherently peer-to-peer, like we can run QUIC over top of a peer-to-peer protocol. So I don't really see that as like a big issue or really something we even have to tackle within this working group itself. I think that, those scenarios that will be pretty important, peer-to-peer and client server scenarios for different reasons.
I agree with what Justin said.
Cool. Roberto?
Also agreeing with what Justin said, not a surprise. But also I wanted to say that there's spanning tree or overlay network or peer-to-peer things that are not as peer-to-peer as we might have imagined. An example is, let's say you have a corporation and the corporation is doing a live stream from CEO and you're broadcasting that into a LAN. How many times do you traverse the internet to LAN link is interesting and potentially problematic. And it's not always solved with a cache, especially if you're an external service, because you can't have a cache in their network for security reasons. So it's interesting to think about not just direct peer-to-peer, but spanning trees and things like that as solving real use cases we see today.
So I guess what I'm asking is that headed into designing application more than mapping media onto QUIC?
I mean, it could be. You can solve everything with an application and UDP.
Yeah. Sure.
But I think there are some interesting things that you would want in order to have low jitter, low latency in such things. So I believe that you really would prefer to have this be lower level in order to extract the properties the best.
So we're talking about something running underneath QUIC.
Or just on top of it. We always forget about layers 5 and 6, right? But
Yeah, sure.
they're there.
Yeah, I believe you. So I guess what I'm saying is for us to dig forward a little bit on this further. If the stuff is above the media coming off QUIC and it's below QUIC, that may be out of scope for what we're likely to be talking about on the mock mailing list.
I think what I'm trying to say is if we say it's out of scope, we are going to eliminate a bunch of solutions that would be quite nice. A solution that I imagine, as an example, is that if we're able to advertise streams as QUIC supports, right? So now we're somewhat on top of QUIC, but we're also able to do NAT-like things, understanding those streams, right? Then we can do packet by packet distribution, forwarding, multiplexing, et cetera, within the confines of the congestion controllers that we still need to use, right? So what I'm saying is trying to layer on top of that ends up making the stack more latent, more jitter, more expensive.
Understood. So let me ask two questions. And number one is the problem that we have the row down here at the bottom that I called attention to, and I could just solve that problem by doing that? so that the peer-to-peer thing is not below the line. Does that help?
Yes.
The other question is, are you talking about something that happens in the middle of a QUIC connection? So that it would be,
say that again. I had some noise.
It would be terminated on both ends?
I mean, there's terminating the connection, but then there's terminating the end-to-end routing, and they're not necessarily the same.
Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what I'm getting at is, are we bundling in a session layer? If we bundle in a session layer, then we can actually do really nice things of merging the work that we do from L7 to L4. If we don't do that and we keep everything at L7, then the ability to do that merging kind of goes away and we lose all those nice potential properties.
Understood.
Okay.
We've
got a few in the queue. So
let me type for a minute and let you run the queue. Is that okay?
Sure.
I want to try to hang on to that point.
Yep. Luke, do you want to go?
Hi. So regarding peer-to-peer and a lot of these use cases, there's a lot of media use cases. It's a huge space. There's a lot of protocols. And it probably makes sense to focus on the ones that QUIC maps nicely to, is kind of what or that QUIC is solving something meaningful. So in the case of peer-to-peer, it would be kind of quite a overhaul to add support for it. But there's totally ways that you can use what we currently have with QUIC. Maybe they don't work in every use case, like maybe real-time latency is difficult or or whatnot. So I do also want to think that we should try to eventually scope things down to based on how complicated it would be to actually support that use case.
Sure. We're not trying to solve every use case. I think what we're trying to do is identify all the ones that we know we have a chance at solving and do a bit of comparison, and that will it sort of inform the latter discussions of which ones are we going to solve, which ones are the most worthwhile, and the reason why I think we put peer-to-peer there is because QUIC doesn't have an easy way of doing that today. I saw some very intelligent comments in the chat suggesting using turn and stun and friends. I'm sure we can come up with better ideas than that. But I think for now maybe it is a little bit too early to discount it. But we will likely, depending on the consensus we get out of this audience, actually it'll probably go back on that list. So don't think this is a permanent thing. No.
Sorry. You got to get used to the Zoom not lowering the hand for you.
Piers.
Hi. Yeah, I was just thinking maybe a little bit along the lines Christian was mentioning, in the fact that this sort of needs to be probably a consideration of how one uses a QUIC connection to do media and other stuff, like just let's just say you could have a live connection and a video on demand connection going down stream, going down the same QUIC connection, and what are the issues around that. So in some senses, that's a sort of use case in that we're trying to combine them, and what changes or what functionality do we need to allow that to happen. I think it's sort of something that's been sort of come up on the list a bit.
Yeah,
Jörg
definitely.
mentioned the sort of interaction between potentially running two different congestion control algorithms, and then there was the other thing Justin mentioned about some kind of potentially a sort of circuit breaker, sort of higher level, if you like, that sort of says you can send media within certain kind of bounds. Say, for example, if you're using BBR and you've got probe where you sort of in theory don't send any data, but then the media obviously needs to keep sending. So it's just if you send within a certain bound, you're okay. So yeah, that was my suggestion really. Whether we want a sort of use case where we combine, we need facilities to transport.
I believe that it's correct
time.
that I'm agreeing with you. I did not mean to cut you off. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
That there, my understanding is that there is work to do on scheduling multiple streams with or without datagram and QUIC, just so that you don't do things like self-congest and things like that. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, but it's also like the sort of issues around if you're running, say, for example, a BBR
yeah,
congestion controller, and then you're trying to send real-time media down the same pipe, and then BBR goes into probe phase, and then it says don't send anything, and you want to still send stuff. It gets tricky, I suppose. Then it may mess up the kind of RTT probe, but it's a tricky one. But then again, like you do a probe period, it's not going to be completely silent, the network anyway. So
okay, cool.
okay.
Like I said, I just wanted to make sure we're not losing track of stuff. It occurred to me about 30 minutes ago what the cost of this meeting is for the people, with everybody that's involved, and the value of your time. So I'm trying to be as helpful with that as I can.
Don't worry, the cost
Christian.
of getting this wrong is far higher than the cost of us spending this time. So value.
You're very kind.
Christian.
Christian, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Pierce mentioned that. I mean, I said that in the chat as well. It's what we want to do here is media over QUIC, okay? And we can take that in two ways. We can say, okay, I'm an engineer. Right now, I have to send media. QUIC is one of the tools in my toolbox. So I'll pick specific tasks in my media application, and I will put them in QUIC if QUIC is adequate for those tasks. And that's fine. That's a fine thing to do. But in my mind, we don't really need an IETF working group for that.
Yeah. I keep
What we
go ahead.
have,
I'm sorry.
what we have there says, okay, you know, in theory, QUIC would be great, except we have all of these little details there that suck. And let's get a list of all those things that suck and all the stuff that we could do if it was really great. And what do we need to do in QUIC to make that not suck and be great?
That's a good point. One of the things I was talking about with Spencer before this was that maybe this work may not end up with a media over QUIC protocol, as it were, actually being done in the IETF, and maybe what the end result might be is that sort of protocol would be defined in another body. I'm not going to mention names, but then we still have to do that step of if there's any changes to QUIC, to RTP, to any of the other IETF protocols, and then we would bring those back to the IETF and sort of discuss through and get those changes or work around them.
When I've talked to people who were bringing work to the IETF, one of the questions I always try to ask is, what protocols are you going to reuse in your solution? What protocols do you need to extend in your solution? And what protocols do you need to invent in your solution? So even if you have the invented protocols that might be done somewhere or anywhere or even be proprietary, you can still have impacts on protocols that you need to extend for them to work well. I really like Christian's characterization of fixing the things that suck as a excellent use of the time for people in the QUIC working group. And probably also good for us to spend some time thinking about what people who would be using the QUIC protocol are trying to do as well. Any thoughts? And Christian, you may still have your hand up.
No, it's the Zoom UI is not exactly best for this kind of stuff.
We could try that. We could try this with another conferencing system
They
later the week and see if the hands go down.
They all sucks in different ways.
This is true. This is very true. So just checking time kinds of things. Oh, sorry, not there. Just checking time kinds of things. Interesting. Cool. How are we doing on time? I'm sorry, I'm just kind of.
We've got about 15, 20 minutes left if we're sticking to a 90-minute schedule.
And I know that some people had to leave for really good reasons right at 90 minutes. So how are people going back to maybe our goals. How are we doing on this? Mo, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's up for real this time. One of the goals that I hope doesn't get missed is that while we keep saying media, and I think a lot of people are thinking about video, we also hear, game streaming being mentioned, and then we hear RTP being mentioned, and yet I have a hard time reconciling the kind of rigid payload formats that are required for RTP versus arbitrary application data, which is what game streaming I assuming would want, or new media types that aren't yet defined over RTP, like haptics and things like that were just talked about today.
Yeah, sure.
I would hope that we have some way for an application to be able to convey this is timed media. This is, in the classic RTP sense, it is timed media, but I don't have a payload format for it, and I don't want you to care that I have a payload format for it. I just want you to know my timing constraints on both, contribution and delivery, and my reliability, constraints or not. And can we have a transport that supports that, and not be rigidly bound to only certain media types? And if we do that, do we lose the richness of being coupled to media types? Do you lose the richness of knowing that it's video and be able to exploit things that you have a live encoder and you can muck with the settings of that live encoder to integrate it with the transport?
I worry that if we go too far away from separating, if we do remember that, the use of RTP, I don't think is necessarily a given in this. It's obviously the direction I think we should be going, at least to exhaust it as a direction. And I mean, just to think of a terrible idea, we could always just say for that arbitrary data, you could pack it into an MPEG-2 TS transport stream and just signal it that way, because that'll pack anything in. But there's a bit more, I think, that we need to work out with it. Justin.
Thanks. I think we're doing a pretty good job on getting a lot of the use cases onto this spreadsheet. And there are some similarities, there are some differences. But I think one of the things that we're not doing is, well, in many of these cases, we have existing protocols that work here. And we haven't really identified, well, why would we do this over QUIC? What's wrong with the existing thing? And I wonder if we spend some time on that, if that might help us sort of identify a path forward, or what are the things that are not served well, or the pain points where a solution may need to emerge.
Good point.
I think one of the points that were raised, that we had at least in mind in looking into QUIC for that, for RTP carriage, is that in RTC, WebRTC style applications, you would have usually multiple data channels and audio and video feeds and the like. And we had this terrible issue of trying to save ports for protocol multiplexing and so on. And so it seemed to be useful, rather than having 17 independent ICE exchanges and having 17 independent other media negotiations, being able to collapse that into one flow set, or essentially one bidirectional flow across the network. That would seem to save resources, reduce brittleness, and a bunch of other things. That would obviously not be a gain for all the application or for all the use cases that we have listed here, but that was one motivation.
I mean, I think it's good to enumerate things like that. I mean, I think if that was our primary motivation, we'd probably just look into what is a multiplexing scheme that could be applied within the WebRTC context, so let's say ports. I think that probably we're going to look for a few more fundamental, issues. And one of the things that I've stated before, but I'll just sort of mention again, is that deploying WebRTC in a server context, it is still really challenging today. And my hope is that use of QUIC since there already will be quick deployments for HTTP-based applications, it'll make some of the server-based deployments easier. And I feel like that's something is a qualitative difference from WebRTC. But I hope there'll be more reasons for us to do this work.
So Justin, are you thinking that Wish is maybe a step in that direction, but not going far enough to solve those problems?
Yeah, I think that Wish is targeting a specific use case, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. My understanding
And
too.
we have more general use cases here.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to level set on that a little bit. So we're getting to close to the end of our hour, and we've had a bunch of us here together. What would people like to see as a next step?
Could we get through the next two people and then kind of
perfect,
cut the line on this subject and then open to that? So Colin.
Hello. So on the RTP thing, I think one of the interesting things about RTP was it was always supposed to have this separation of timing and ordering and all those features, and the framing of interesting things within it. And that the payload formats seem to have turned into a much heavier weight thing over the years, and there used to be a lot more willingness to change them, and a lot more flexibility in there, and people experimenting more. And I don't know if that's a sort of a consequence of the way we've done the signaling, or if it's just inertia and everything, and just things getting piled on top of them all. But with some idea of this way of specifying the framing, I think is important. And maybe payload formats as written are too heavyweight, but something like that specifies how you put whatever it is, whether it's video or gaming content or haptics or who knows what, into the packets in a smart way that allows the application to really tightly couple with the way the media is done, I think is really important if you really want to get that low latency and high performance. And you can do it in a much more general way and not worry about that. But if you're really pushing the very low latency, the very high performance issues, then you lose things. So we need to be careful where we draw that boundary.
Thank you, Colin.
Ian.
Yeah, thanks. I was kind of answering the question before, like, where do we see some of the biggest holes? And I think it's, at least from my perspective, it's pretty clear that media ingestion is kind of like a difficult space right now. There's a lot of different options, but none of them are particularly good, particularly for like lower latency options. Like Dash is fine for VOD and such, but for low latency streaming, kind of all the options have various problems that are fairly serious. And so, in terms of pain points, like that's a pretty big pain point, because like there really is no good option, is my opinion. So I don't know, just putting that out there. I don't think we have time to go into like why the other options are not ideal in certain ways, but just putting that out there.
No, I kind of agree with you. I think that the adaptive bitrate protocols like Dash and HLS, where they have low latency versions of them, the one plus side is that if the audiences just doesn't have the bandwidth capacity, or there's too much jitter, etc., they can still fall back to a higher latency but more reliable version. Whereas when you go into the more ultra low places, you kind of don't have that option. It's if you're lucky, you've got things like scalable video, and at worst you're just dropping frames and packets galore on the floor. But I think it'll be hard for us to try and squeeze in something that is a perfect bridge between those two sort of extremes, as it were. Roberto.
we kind of have a history of inventing protocols to solve API problems. And I think part of that is because, and you know, this is a favorite horse of mine, but it's because we really don't pay attention to the session layers. And, you know, I'm like, people want to use RTP, HTTP, SRT, ZXC, I don't care what, right? Like we have some interesting operational problems that we can definitely solve by making some small modifications to something like QUIC that allow us to have a session layer. And then once we have that session layer, now we can start evolving these things as we would like in whatever independent or non-independent way we want. So I think that this is a really interesting place for us to consider addressing. It does hook into the protocols. It's definitely something that we are well suited to trying to solve.
Cool. I'm assuming Ian's hand is still up. So I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to check a couple of things. My hope at the was at the end of this week, we would have at least some stuff figured out here and maybe here. We have that for a couple of things. Do people think that filling out, working on what that stuff might look like further on, more continuing to work on that this week is a useful thing? Because my hope was that we would get to Friday and be able to say, this is at least some work that needs to happen in the IETF and start moving forward on things. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Really quickly before I give it to Colin, is that I think whether or not we can achieve that will be determined about whether or not we clear up all of the other things that we've identified before then. I think that if we've got the use cases cleared out and some of the other points that a lot of people have raised, that's a determining factor on it. Colin.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these obvious work items, I mean, I suspect it may be that they're obvious in the sense that we're going to do them whether or not they're a good idea. We may want to have the conversation about whether we think this is the right approach, because there's a pretty big disconnect between how RTP works and how QUIC works.
Yeah, understood. And this also gets back a little bit to people with existing infrastructure. Is it a hostile act if we schedule another session like this before Friday? But when I say like this, I mean kind of seeing how much we could push down on this. Even just with me and James, I think he and I were both making a lot of progress, shaking out details and things like that before the meeting. And we've only really been talking about this for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Victor.
I think this has opposite problems. That is to say, I feel at this point it would be much more productive to talk on the mailing list as opposed to in person, because I feel like so far we've managed to achieve more on the mailing list.
We certainly fleshed out an awful lot in the last 24 hours. So yes to that. I had an action to report kind of what we talked about today to places like MOPS and things like that later in the week, and I will try to describe what we've talked about here on the mailing list by tomorrow, and kind of see how much I can screw together about that. But I really appreciate people spending the time here to help us with this, and I'm here all week, as we say in the IETF. So if people have things that they want to talk about that's maybe not quite right for the mock mailing list or something like that, but like I say, just let me know. Is there anything else we need to say? Thank you all for your help.
Thank you. Make good choices, and whatever the other thing you say is.
Oh, the other one that was, I made the mistake of finding a advertisement that for like little cheese crackers that
oh yeah,
they were enclosed in Stay Fresh bags. So the thing was Stay Fresh cheese bags. And on that, I will apologize and leave.
Fresh.
Thank you all.
Thank you.